When I first got into bodybuilding training, especially bodybuilding competition, I had to search around to discover and experiment with various diets that would produce the greatest amounts of muscular definition while minimizing muscle loss. I tried many, many diets. I tried every diet known to man. We're talking about, this would be the mid 60s, mid 1960s. I was a teenage bodybuilder. I wasn't a naturally muscular guy, and so dieting was very, very important to me. I didn't use any type of anabolic steroids or any other drugs. I needed an effective diet. I tried many, many diets. Most of them failed. And what I mean by failed is that I couldn't stick with them. The key to success of any diet is what's known as dieting compliance. And that simply means staying on a diet long enough to meet your fat loss goals. And a lot of people can't stick to diets, or so they wind up going on a binge or abandoning the diets. Basically, that's what happened to me. I tried low-fat, high-carb diets, all the popular diets of the time. All of them failed, mainly because, quite frankly, I was voraciously hungry. I couldn't stick with the diets. I was starving. I just couldn't take it. I had low energy. Well, the turning point came when my training partner, I was living in New York at the time. He traveled back and forth between New York and California, and he began training under the supervision of a famous trainer, bodybuilding trainer in the 1960s named Vince Gironda, or Garanda, depending on how you want to pronounce the name. Vince was the actual premier bodybuilding trainer of the 60s. He was involved in many, many top bodybuilding champions of the day, trained at his gym, including Larry Scott, who won the first two Mr. Olympia titles in 1965 and 1966, Don Howarth, many, many others. They had a lot of movie stars. Anyway, Vince was a kind of a vanguard type of person who was way ahead of his time when it came to nutrition and exercise knowledge. He conceived of and invented a lot of different exercises. The so-called Scott bench, sometimes called the preacher's bench, that was basically developed by, well, not developed by Vince, but he copied it from a gym called the Easton Brothers Gym, where he himself trained in the early 1940s. But the point being that Vince was very, very extremely intelligent guy. And Vince's technique for promoting the lowest levels of body fat was a low carbohydrate diet. Now you have to understand, in the early 60s, nobody was really using a low carbohydrate diet. There was a couple of books out, but none of them, nobody really paid attention to them. In bodybuilding, people were just using standard so-called balanced diets or high or low-fat diets, but the low carbs hadn't really caught on, and Vince was kind of ahead of his time in recommending a low-carb diet. And now, what happened was when my training partner explained to me the nuances of the low-carb diet, I started using it, and lo and behold, I was able to stay on the diet for several months. I lost all my body fat, and I actually took on a muscular appearance for the first time in my life, despite all the previous training I had done. I'd never been able to get really what they call cut up or highly defined. But once I went on a low-carb diet, I got the term shredded, is what they call it. In fact, my abs were so deep and cut that when I was, I think I was 14 years old, I was training at a gym called Mid-City Gym in New York. People would actually come to the gym and ask me to hold my shirt up, so they could take a photo of my abs. They were extremely deep, it was because not so much that I did a lot of abdominal work. It's because I had very low body fat from the low carb diets. Now, as time went on, I kind of refined my use of low carb diets, where I would begin with what's known as a ketogenic diet. A ketogenic diet is defined as an ultra low carb diet, which features no more than 25 to 30 grams of carbohydrate a day. So it's essentially a carbohydrate-free diet. Now, what they call it a ketogenic diet, because when you go on the diet, after about maybe 48 hours or slightly longer, you exhaust all the carbohydrate reserves in the body. Carbohydrate is stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscles. And after ingesting no carbohydrate, for the first couple of hours, or let's say first 2 days, your body kind of gradually breaks down the stored carbohydrate as glycogen. And once that happens, the body turns to alternative sources of fuel. And that one of the fuel, of course, is body fat. When your carbohydrate stores are low, your body was using body fat, and that's the entire basis of low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets. The ketogenic diet is called that because when you eliminate carbohydrates, the liver starts to produce byproducts of incomplete fat combustion or burning or oxidation called ketone bodies or ketones, which are metabolic acids that can serve as an energy source for just about every tissue in the body, especially muscles. It can be used by the brain in place of glucose. If you know anything about brain function, you know that glucose is very important for brain function. However, ketones can stand in for glucose, so you don't have any brain problems if you're on a ketogenic diet because your brain is getting plenty of ketones. It can be used as fuel. Now, contrary to what some people say, ketones are not quite as effective for brain function as actual glucose, but they can prevent any kind of problems such as lack of concentration, that type of thing. Anyway, that's the ketogenic diet. So I use the ketogenic diet. I found from experience that it took the first week or so, and people have written this as a critique of low-carb diets, when your body breaks down glycogen, each gram of glycogen is stored with 2.7 grams of water. Newer studies show it could be up to 4 grams of water for each gram of glycogen. But when your body breaks down glycogen, you not only lose the sugar, but you also lose the water that's stored with carbohydrate. So as a consequence, in the first, let's say, 10 days of any type of low-carbohydrate diet, you're going to lose a lot of water, and it's going to show up on the scale as a weight loss of as much as 10 pounds. The truth of the matter is very little of that is actual body fat. Most of it is water. That's true. But after the first 10 days, everything that you lose after that is going to be body fat. As a matter of fact, well, anyway, getting back to myself, I found from experience that it took me about, I didn't actually notice significant fat loss on the ketogenic diet until after about 3 to 4 weeks. I didn't know back then, but I know now that there's a situation called keto adaptation that has to occur, where your body has to switch over from using glucose as a primary fuel to using body fat and ketones as the primary fuel. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes a couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, that's the problem with a lot of low-carbohydrate diets, which have found that low-carbohydrate diets are no better than low-fat diets, because when they've compared the diets, they've done it for maybe 2 weeks at the most, and in 2 weeks you're not going to see a lot of fat loss on a ketogenic low-carb diet, because again, it takes the body anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for the body to adapt to a ketogenic or low-carb diet to the point of using more body fat as a fuel source. So I would use the ketogenic diet. From my experience, as I said, I noticed I didn't start losing significant amounts of body fat until after about 3 to 4 weeks on the diet, which actually was a manifestation of keto adaptation. So I'd stay on the ketogenic diet for about 6 weeks, and then I would gradually add carbs back into my diet, mainly in the form of natural carbs like fruits and vegetables. And I would add them up, and I found that my tolerance for carbohydrates, and what I mean by tolerance is the amount where I could still be taking a certain amount of carbohydrates and lose body fat, that turned out to be 100 grams a day. In other words, if I was trying to lose body fat when I was in bodybuilding, training for a contest, if I went over 100 grams of carbohydrate a day, my body fat loss would abruptly cease. I wouldn't get fat, but I wouldn't. The extent of body fat reduction would greatly slow down. So, so that's what I did. But you get a lot of criticisms of ketogenic diets and low carb diets. For example, they say that it's low carb diet is bad for, especially ketogenic diet, is bad for cardiovascular health, because when you're on a ketogenic diet is a moderate protein intake, not super high protein. You can't eat massive amounts of protein on a ketogenic diet because some amino acids are converted into glucose. And if you're taking in, let's say, 300 grams of protein on a ketogenic diet, you're not on a ketogenic diet anymore, because you're converting a lot of the amino acids into glucose, which will completely obliterate the whole purpose of a ketogenic diet. So you have to have a moderate amount of protein. Usually it comes out to what they recommend for the general public, which is zero point 0.8 grams to 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Maybe a little bit more because you're a bodybuilder. So you can get maybe up to 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein, or slightly less when you're on a ketogenic diet. And that'll keep you in ketosis and maximize the fat burning effects. Now, as far as the cardiovascular, the critique of low carb and ketogenic diets is that when you cut out carbohydrates, you like I say, you moderately you maintain your protein intake, but you greatly increase your fat intake. In other words, you substitute fat for carbohydrate. Some ketogenics feature as much as 70% of calories as fat, and because of that, the association of fat with cardiovascular disease, a lot of critics say that the ketogenic diet is very bad for cardiovascular health. They overlook several factors. For example, the high fat intake actually raises a protective form of cholesterol called high density lipoprotein. The low density lipoprotein, which could be dangerous if it's oxidized, is raised when you're on a ketogenic diet because of the high fat intake. However, the type of LDL produced on a ketogenic diet is what they call the large fluffy form, which is less subject to oxidation. Now that's an important point because low density lipoprotein is only dangerous, in other words, it only causes atherosclerosis and heart disease when it's oxidized. Now the type of LDL that's rapidly oxidized is the small dense variety. And what produces small dense LDL? High carbohydrate, low fat diets. The very type of diet that's recommended by various health organizations to prevent cardiovascular disease actually produces the most dangerous type of LDL. But anyway, as far as the weight loss, the mechanisms of weight loss, as I said, I found that low carbohydrate diets were very effective for me, mainly because compared to other diets I had tried, my compliance was far greater. In other words, I was able to stay on these diets for months at a time. Sometimes I stay on them for 9 to 10 months, depending on how much body fat I have to lose. Why was I able to stay on the diet so long? Because what I found was that low carb and especially ketogenic diets completely knocked out my appetite. After about a month on a ketogenic diet, I literally had to force myself to eat. Now, what I was doing automatically without realizing it or without consciously doing so was I was greatly lowering my calorie intake. And that's another critique of carbohydrate diet. They say, well, it's not the carbs that do it, and it's not the insulin control. It's the fact that you're just eating fewer calories. Yeah, but why are you eating fewer calories? That's the part they overlook. The reason you're eating fewer calories is because of the appetite suppression effect that's induced by ketones. Ketones lower your appetite. This has been proven over and over again. So when you're on a ketogenic diet, more so than a low-carb diet, your appetite decreases greatly. Probably, I would assume it's similar to the appetite suppression you get from the new GLP-1 agonist drugs like Ozempic, which work also by lowering or knocking out your appetite. So when I use these diets, my appetite would, as I said, would decrease to the extent where I had to literally force feed myself because I really didn't count calories back then. I only paid attention to carbohydrate. But I would guess that at the lowest point, as far as calorie intake when I followed ketogenic diets, I would guess that it was probably about maybe 1,200 calories. Now, 1,200 calories would cause any man to lose body fat. So yeah, okay, maybe it was the calories, the lower calorie intake that caused me to lose tremendous amounts of body fat on the ketogenic diet. But the point is, the reason I was able to do that was the decrease in appetite, which was produced by the large increase in ketones, which knocked out my appetite. So it was still, even though I was eating fewer calories, the fewer calories resulted directly from the effects of the low carbohydrate diet, or the ketogenic diet, I should point out. Now, also they found in studies that going on a ketogenic diet or low carb diet lowers appetite-stimulating hormones in the body. The most appetite-stimulating hormone in the body is called ghrelin. It's a gut hormone. It's produced in between meals. It gradually builds up. It gives you the sense of hunger that you want to eat. And ghrelin, the basic function of ghrelin is to stimulate hunger so you stay alive and eat. Ghrelin also, by the way, interacts with growth hormone. So that's whole nother story that I don't want to get into. But anyway, the point being that ketogenic diets and low carbohydrate diets, they also, besides the ketone appetite suppression effect, they also suppress the appetite by lowering these appetite stimulating hormones such as ghrelin and a couple of others. And also, of course, insulin. That's again one of the key features of ketogenic and low carb diets is that it lowers insulin release. Anytime insulin is lowered, it opens the door to a greater use of fat as a fuel source. It also prevents the increased fat accretion, in other words, gaining body fat. There are people that argue this and say insulin doesn't do any of that. That's complete bull. It's in all the biochemistry textbooks. Insulin is a storage hormone. It stores carbohydrates as glycogen, and it stores calories as body fat. And when insulin levels are high, every mechanism in the body that's used to oxidize fat is suppressed. And that is a biological fact. And that's one of the reasons why people lose body fat on low-carb or ketogenic diets, because you get a greatly suppressed insulin release, along with the decreased calories. However, all those things contribute to the fat loss. And by the way, when they've compared ketogenic diets or low-carb diets directly to low-fat, high-carb diets, the ketogenic and low-carb diets always produce greater rates of weight loss. Now, some of the critiques of low-carb diets will point out, well, that only works for a couple of months. After 6 months, both ketogenic dieters and high-carb, high-fat diets lose the same amount of weight. Well, if you look closely at those studies, you'll find that after 6 months, a lot of people have gradually added carbohydrates back into their diet. So at the 6-month mark, they're no longer on a ketogenic or low-carb diet. They're eating a substantial amount of carbohydrates. So now it's just calories. And since their calorie intake is about the same as the low-fat, high-carb diets, of course they're going to lose fat at the same rate. You see how they just misrepresent this stuff. But what's interesting is they just came a recent study that was published June 24th, 2024, in a journal called Nature Metabolism, illustrated still another mechanism of how ketogenic diets support weight loss. And what this has to do is with what they call bile acids. Now, bile acids, what is bile? Bile is a substance made in the liver. It's produced in the liver. It travels through ducts in the liver where it's stored in the gallbladder. And when you eat a meal containing fat, bile is secreted and it helps emulsify the fat globules. It makes them smaller so that fat digestive enzymes called lipases can actually digest the fat. That's the function of bile. And bile acids are the substances that make up bile. Now, there's two of them. What this study found, first it was a mouse study. They first tested mice, and then they looked at humans, and they found that there's two particular bile acids. One's called taurodeoxycholic acid, and then one's called ursodeoxycholic acid. Now, that second one might be familiar to some of you. It's sold as a supplement called TUDCA, TUDCA, which I've written about and talked about in previous videos. TUDCA is actually very useful to those who are taking high doses of oral anabolic steroids. One of the main side effects of large doses of oral anabolic steroids is that they cause an inflammation of the liver, and the inflammation of the liver actually interferes with the passage of bile through the liver. It slows the passage of bile through the liver, and the back of that bile in the liver can cause severe liver damage. That's a condition called cholestasis. when you take TUDCA, because it's a bile acid, it thins out the bile and allows, it relieves the pressure on the liver. That's why I always tell people who are taking large doses of oral anabolic steroids to also use the supplement called TUDCA, which is actually toro-ursodeoxycholic acid. But anyway, in this mouse study, they found that these two bile acids protected against obesity by decreasing calorie absorption in the intestine. They did two. They followed up with 2 human studies, and they found that it was the same effect. The study showed that 22 specific metabolites increased. This is on a ketogenic diet, while 18 decreased on the ketogenic diet. When the researchers tested another 7-week intervention involving supplementation with the amino acid methionine, it reversed the decreases in body weight and fasting caused by the ketogenic diet. It also reduced 6 particular bile acids linked to weight and glucose changes. And by the way, studies have shown that methionine, which is an essential amino acid, if you cut it down or greatly reduce its intake in animals, it greatly extends their lifespan by as much as 30%. It's a little bit difficult to do that in humans because methionine is an essential amino acid. If you completely cut out methionine, you get something called fatty liver. I'm not going to get into that right now. But treating mice with these bile acids revealed that the 2 bile acids significantly lowered body weight, blood sugar levels, and improved glucose tolerance. This was regardless of whether on a regular diet or a ketogenic diet supplemented with methionine. So in other words, when you're on the ketogenic diet, you increase these 2 bile acids, and it actually promotes increased weight loss. Again, this was first shown in a mouse study. Then they tested it on humans. So they conducted an observational study where they measured the bile acids in the blood from 460 subjects with an age range of 20 to 60. They also examined data from previously published low-carbohydrate ketogenic diets that involved 25 adult women with overweight or obesity. Consistent with the findings in mice, lower blood levels of specific bile acids in humans were significantly associated with higher body mass and fasting blood sugar levels. In other words, these bile acids apparently help you lose body fat. And the bottom line to remember is that in this study, increases in these bile acids was shown to result in decreased body weight and fasting glucose levels in mice and in humans. The authors offer one explanation. They say that the ketogenic diet reduced the levels of a specific gut bacteria called Lactobacillus murinus ASF361, which produces an enzyme called bile salt hydrolase. Lower levels of this particular bacteria, reductions in bile salt hydrolase, increase the levels of the 2 mentioned bile acids, toro-deoxycholic and toro-ursodeoxycholic acid. These increased bile acids reduce caloric absorption by interfering with the expression of a protein-coding gene called, I know this gets technical, called carbonic anhydrous 1 in the intestines, which is linked to obesity. In other words, it actually lowers a gene that's linked to obesity. So there, let me see, what else can I say? I think that's it. I think that's it. But what I find that's really interesting is that this is still another study that underscores the fact that ketogenic diets are so effective for losing body fat. As a matter of fact, I wrote an article in my Applied Metabolics publication. It's called the 5% fat diet, 5% fat body fat diet. And I could give you the article in a nutshell. I explain the mechanisms of how ketogenic diets promote body fat reductions. But I also mentioned that, to my knowledge and from what my experience, for most people, not all, but for most people, the only real way to achieve body fat levels of 5% or lower are to go on a ketogenic diet. It's the most effective ultra low body fat diet there is. So that's all I'll say about this. If you want more information about nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research, supplement science, which supplements work, which ones don't, ergogenic aids that'll help you train harder and more intensely, effective fat loss techniques, women's health and fitness, and much more. All these are covered in Applied Metabolics, www.appliedmetabolics.com. It's 30 to 45 pages, no ads, ad-free, solid evidence-based information that concludes my over 60 years of knowledge and experience. I can save you a lot of time in preventing you from making the same mistakes that I made over the course of 6 decades. There is no other publication that I know of that equals the extent of in-depth information that's offered in Applied Metabolics. It's also written in a magazine style. It's not written like a medical journal like a lot of these other digital publications where you have to have a medical dictionary to understand a lot of the terms that are used in these articles. I've been a professional writer for over half a century. I know how to write for the public, the people that write those other digital publications. And I'm not saying the information is bad. All I'm saying it's not well presented. It's very difficult to read. Not a single one of them is a professional writer, nor has any of them had any professional writing experience. And that's what sets me apart, among other things. So subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, send me an email, and I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on exercise, nutrition, and general health and medicine. I have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only could send me short questions about anything they read in Applied Metabolics or anything that comes to mind related to nutrition, exercise, and I will answer their questions as an appreciation of their subscription to Applied Metabolics. Obviously, this only applies to current subscribers. I don't answer unsolicited questions. I don't have time. So I think that's about it. If you think my videos are of any value, please subscribe to my channel. It's free. It doesn't cost you a dime. And I come out with new videos every Tuesday. And if you also please tell others so I can grow this channel. I'll be honest. I'll tell you up front. As you can see, there's no bells and whistles. There's no like fancy cartoons and little videos of people laughing for no discernible reason in the background. All I do is give you solid evidence-based information that's practical and some stuff that you can use right away. And I never lie, and I tell the truth. And I also am not on the payroll of any supplement or any company to push products like about 9 out of 10 other so-called YouTube creators are. They're all sponsored by various companies, and they subtly push products, whether it's in the video itself or in the little box right below the video. They're shills for other companies. You won't find that with me. I'm independent, and I'm out to tell the 100% truth. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, this is also the truth. Go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. Thank you for listening.